social as well as the arts, social issues. And what I want to speak to you about today is context. Context, objectives, and the realization of objectives. And it's curious coming back, having left on the plane from Shannon in 1975 to go to drama school. Coming back and spending time with family and friends in the city and watching Ireland, Limerick, go through the convulsions of the last 2 years. And also having very strong affinity with the city and with who I am, constantly defined as somebody who is from Limerick, from Ireland. And then issues which begin to divide us. And it's curious in terms of how comfortable are we to sit next to a person who isn't exactly the same as us. And it was vital in terms of what the last speaker said about the fact that you now have the tension between whether it's gang culture or whether it's the tension between the Pogues and the white middle class on the North Circular Road, or the black African kids who have come in. Because I met my first black person when I went to Relevance College in 1975 on the first day of college. And I also met my first communist. And that was pretty confronting, because I was, yes, an arrogant, just turned 18-year-old who had been educated by the Jesuits, who was opinionated and secure and confident in a world which at the time I considered very clearly to be full of right and wrong and black and white in political and social terms. I knew what I believed in, I knew what I thought was right. Interestingly, I was elected instantly to the to the Students' Union, because I stood up in front of my year on the second or third day, declared my politics, declared my religion, declared my philosophy in terms of how I thought that people should actually interact and communicate with each other. And all those Brits, predominantly, and some Scandinavians, bought into it and elected me. And then, of course, I had to learn that what I believed in and who I was and my identity and what gave me my values were different from the guy who came from Newcastle, or from Scotland, or from Denmark, or from Brixton. And our experiences were different. And when I was thinking about coming here today to speak and to contribute, I thought I've actually got to do some research. And my research went back. I didn't just go back and read what the Arts Council of Ireland is saying at the moment in terms of its philosophy and policy for 2011 to 2013. And yes, I read the ambitions for 2030 and was excited by the courage and the ambition of the 2030 objectives and what they want to realize in terms of whoever actually had that idea and put it together. And I also read about 2014 in the City of Culture. And then I thought, okay, I know what gets me in terms of my Irishness now. I know that it's when I'm watching the Republic play in the football, in soccer, because that was the game that I was brought up on in the Markets Field. I want them to win. I don't want a moral victory of only being beaten 10-2 by England at Dalymount Park anymore. I want victory, and I want success, and I want to be up there. And I want the soccer team to be up there like the rugby team is, because somehow my Irish identity is tied to that football team. And I'm highly emotional, and I'm standing up screaming at my TV in London when they're playing, trying to qualify for the World Cup. And then I think, thank God, the FAI has the vision to engage Martin O'Neill and to engage Roy Keane, because they were absolutely the right people to be engaged, to lead that team into the Euros. And what does it come down to? In that case, it comes down to leadership. It comes down to those people in positions of authority actually having the courage to say, we're going to get the best. We're going to get the best people here to galvanize this process, whatever it is, if it's the soccer team, the rugby team, whatever it is. And now in theatre, in thinking about my experiences over the last 38 years, it comes down to leadership as well. And it's going to come down to those of you who are practitioners actually declaring yourselves in terms of the leadership, but you have to define your objectives and you have to define your vision. It's a highly individual thing, and there has to be some sort of collective. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start speaking in principles. Where do I go for the principles? So I went back to the Constitution. I went back to the Constitution of 1922 and the Constitution of 1937. And I looked and I looked and I looked, and I didn't see very much reference to culture. But I did find references to the state actually imposing itself. It's very interesting. The state will impose itself upon the private sector for the sake of the people. How about that? Now, it would be great in Britain at the moment if they had that in a constitution and they imposed themselves on the power companies and said, actually, you're only going to get 3% profit next year because capitalism, unbridled capitalism, has failed. When I was 16, and I was just turning 17, it was a general election. And again, I'm going to declare myself who I am. My family was Fine Gael. Was I part of the right wing of the party? No. I was part of the left wing of the party. I was identified with what were then called the Young Tigers. Their mantra was social justice. There was a coalition with the Labour Party, the first coalition. The first time I didn't live under a Fianna Fáil government was at the age of 17, when that coalition came to power. One of the great things that we have seen from outside looking into Ireland in the last few years is that the people have said, to hell with cronyism, to hell with corruption. You guys are going to have to take responsibility for your immorality and for the mess you got the country into, but we will also take responsibility. We will take responsibility for our excesses as well. And that is the image this country has at the moment outside. There is respect for the fact that Ireland faced up to its situation as opposed to the Greeks trying to burn down their parliament. And that's a positive message. And it's also good to come back to the city and to be here and to have this discussion. And to have, believe me, to be dumping Stab City. Because the profile of the city outside of this country, the references are still Stab City. And why are we defined by one book? Why is our entire culture defined by Angela's ashes? I'm sick of it. I'm absolutely sick of it. And I'm pleased that you and this guy who's talking about music and integration and children being educated to communicate with each other through music are issues which are actually being brought to the fore. But when I looked at that Constitution, I thought, everything is a context. Everything that I've done in the last 38 years is in the context of the people I've been interacting with. I am who I am because my mother drove me and my sister to Dublin to see plays in the Dublin Theatre Festival. I saw a brilliant production of Oedipus Rex with Des Kay years ago. But who directed it? A Greek. But it was absolutely fantastic, and the best thing I ever saw at the Abbey. And those actors were transcended by the interaction of that director working with them. And the young Des Kay was a revelation. I saw Peter O'Toole in Man and Superman on the stage in Dublin. But I'm also my father's son. He was a contributor to the city, as my mother was. And it was a time when the voluntary sector was so active in this city, because there weren't big arts councils, there wasn't tons of money. The state wasn't doing everything for the people were doing it for themselves. So whether it was the handicapped children that my mother was involved in working with, whether it was the diocesan pools that my father did in the bingo hall with the birds on a Wednesday and a Saturday and a Sunday night, whether it was being the accountant for the diocese when they were building St. Munchins, whether it was going and putting the flowers on the altar at the Rosary Church. These were all community activities. And yes, it did come from a white middle class background, but the middle class has got to stop apologizing for their existence as well. And it was a relief to hear you want the bus to go to those areas. Because they are also, remember, some of the new poor. And also those kids are stuck in front of their blinking video games when they should be communicating. And the ultimate conclusion that I came to in terms of what we still need. Yes, we need music in the schools. Yes, we need English and history and geography. But we need drama in the schools. We need to be able to communicate. The state needs to be communicating. The people need to be communicating with the young people. What is it to be Irish? What is it? What is the core moral message that we've got as a people that we want to actually infuse so that we actually have a social structure and morality that everything falls into place? We have a context. What is the context? There are great things in that Constitution about the right of everybody to have a job. And the context that every artist here has got to think is that I'm operating in a world where everybody doesn't have a job. Context. The context of me being fortunate in the 60s, a child of the 60s, was that this city was vibrant. What do I remember about the city centre? I remember Limerick clothing factory. I remember Mattison's. I remember pigs being slaughtered in Thomas Street, and you could hear the squealing from the abattoir as you walked up Thomas Street. I remember the siren of Cleves across the river, and of hundreds of people walking out in their white coats to go home for lunch. I remember rugby teams, and God knows, thank God it is still being retained, where the so-called working class and the dockers in Munsters and Shannon played present and played Garryo and played Bohemians and Richmond. And there was no sense of, yes, there was a bit of them and us, but we weren't afraid to walk into each other's areas. And my God, I'm incensed. I'm incensed at the idea that there are parts of this city now which suffer from the same things as those British cities do, where the kids are afraid to go from one part of the country, one part of their neighbourhood to the other because of gang culture or because of fear. And what does it need? It needs people who will have the courage to lead, whether it be politicians, whether it be civil servants, whether it be artists, who actually get out there and say, this is morally wrong. We have things which we can actually, which can unify us. And yes, I am a social Christian Democrat. And so I say to the capitalists, you have a responsibility. And I say to the people who are taking the money, taking the benefits, you have a responsibility back as well. That's my political position. But it affects what I do as an artist as well. And as a commercial artist. Because being a producer, being an independent producer, I have to live by the sword as to whether people will actually turn up and see a show that I put on or not. And if people are mad enough to sponsor and to finance and to invest in the romance of a commercial piece of theatre as well. But I can tell you that as a social democrat, I still exchange emails with people who work front of house at Drury Lane Theatre when I did the Lord of the Rings there. Because my view was, if my punter was coming in, I wanted the box office to look them in the eye and to say, you're very welcome, and I hope you enjoy the show. And I wanted the lady, the young girl, or the young guy who was a drama student tearing their tickets to make eye contact and to welcome them and to have a sense of ownership for the piece. And everybody was invited to the party, not just the actors and the investors, everybody who worked on that show, and everybody got a personal message, and everybody got a first night gift. They also got eye contact from me, and they got conversation from me, and they were part of it. And it's so important in terms of what the guy was saying, in terms of the sense of community. As artists, we have a responsibility. We can set the social agenda, and we can reflect the social agenda as well. And when I come back to the inspiring parts of my experiences, there was a time in the 60s and the 70s when the British theatre community believed that it would change society. Okay. It turned out to be naive in the advent of Thatcherism. But there was a belief at that time that you could actually change society. But you can at least, if you can't change it, you can reflect it. And you can get people discussing it and debating it. Monica was telling me last night about a piece of theatre she wants to do about a tragedy in the city. And I think we should do it. I saw a piece in Sydney Theatre Company about 2 years ago, which was absolutely extraordinary. It challenged the audience. It was about a little girl who actually had been abducted and had been murdered and left in a swamp near Sydney. And it showed the cynicism of how the media had exploited the story. And it showed the harrowing truth and reality of what that meant for the people who were actually involved. And it was a core piece of theatre that I will never forget, because it threw up for me, and threw up those issues of Fox News and CNN, news entertainment, those sanctimonious journalists in Syria who don't have the sincerity and the immediacy of saying, this is absolutely fucking terrible, what's happening here. But it gives you that slightly earnest reporting because it's simply entertainment. It's appalling. And cut through people, cut through to the real stories. Deal with the stories of these kids who are afraid to go from one place to the other in Limerick, because that has got to change. And challenge those officials at City Hall or wherever the hell they are, and challenge the politicians to come up with vision. Because again, as a child of the 60s and having just relived the morning of John F. Kennedy's death, I remember the optimism of the 60s and how it was beaten down. And we do live at a point of opportunity. We live at a point when capitalism has failed. And there has to be a new world order. So you have an opportunity as artists to redefine, now that the thing is broken, the rebuilding of it. And there's an amazing opportunity in Limerick, because between 2014, with its £6 million euros or whatever the hell it is, and between 2030, when there's supposed to be a rejuvenation of the city, there is an absolutely critical point for everybody who has anything to do with the Midwest region in particular, to start defining not just the fabric, but the philosophy and the ethos of the people who live there. There are examples that have gone awry of the initiatives that are going to be taken here between 2014 and 2030. And I want to share some of them with you. And these are the things to be careful about, because I hope that you're asking the questions of the people in the decision makers over the next few years. I'm dealing with in Brazil at the moment with a theatre project. And Brazil has issues, believe me, you've seen them. You've seen the issues Brazil has. But Brazil, for example, Rio de Janeiro has spent hundreds of millions of dollars, not just on those sports centres that you're seeing at the moment, but on a thing called Music City, in a place called Bar. And when the practitioners got into the building, they realized that 30% of the audience can't see the stage. Because some idiot was hired to design that building, who had no relation to the practitioners, who didn't speak to the people who were going to use it, and who didn't have the gumption to go out and to look at theatres and the principles of design around the world and why something works and why it doesn't work. Yeah. And the Limerick version is the Beltane. The criminal catastrophe of 1.2 million euro being spent on a venue which now is not fit for purpose. The Brazilians are finally sending the politicians to jail who screwed up. Who is taking account and responsibility for wasting 1.2 million in Limerick?
Nobody yet.
It's a disgrace. This is the context of the place that you're living in and functioning in. And what I wanted to share with you today is that there are people in similar situations to you in other parts of the world as well. Now they're on the streets in Brazil at the moment, and the government is terrified. Whether they'll actually ever break through because of the endemic corruption in that country is a question. But we shouldn't be taking these things lying down. And for those of you who actually, you asked absolutely the relevant question about the other acts, the other arts getting involved with the music. And, yeah? Sorry, yes. Because it isn't about just whether every band there, who knows this, is going to end up being the next U2. It's about self-respect. It's about communication. It's about fun and enjoyment. And it's about having something more to do than get slammed drunk on a Thursday and a Friday night. And it's the same for drama in schools. Having had private lessons from my sister, I had to go, my father had to pay for me to go to London to drama school because there were no grants in Ireland for drama. And I went to a teaching acting course at Rose Bruford and became a jack of all trades. Had 12 years as an actor. After my father's death, had an epiphany, and then indirectly realized that actually my skills were more suited to producing than to acting, and that my love of theatre was greater than my love of acting. And it is addictive, producing, and I'm so lucky to have found it. And the stakes are high. But do I know I'm alive? Absolutely. I know I'm alive every minute of the day. But it isn't about that in terms of drama. It's about communication in the home between a father, a mother, an uncle, a grandfather, and their child, between siblings, between these divided communities. It's role-playing, it's self-respect. And if there's one thing, God knows, Donald O'Malley brought in free education. Well done, Fianna Fáil. Brought in free education in Ireland. And we now have free third-level education. But we still actually don't teach, as a matter of course, to every child in our schools the basic skills of communication. And with that communication and the power to express and the power to have an opinion and to express an opinion and to challenge the politicians and systems, we would have a vital, active democracy. And I think it's curious, in terms of what I've heard over the last 12 hours, the massive amount of activity that there seems to be in music and in dance, but not in the dangerous, volatile, problematic, difficult, dirty world of the spoken word. And maybe it's time we had another riot, like Sing had, with the play Born to Western World, when it was produced first in Dublin. And maybe this time the theatre could be the writers, the performers and the directors have that voice that makes the challenge for these issues, these social, political issues. Because it's deadly in terms of the danger that Strictly Come Dancing or some crappy television show becomes the aspiration for everybody. Or every kid in the country has something they have to be on Let's Dance, whatever the damn thing is called, on Sky. It's not about that. It's about being a better parent, a better child, a better bus driver who can actually, God knows, you want to be able to hear the guy on the bus. You want to be able to hear the person on the train when they make an announcement. You want somebody to be confident enough to say hello to you when you're booking your ticket for the airline or whatever the hell it is. These are the things that we need to do. These are the things we need to give to the population going forward, to the new generations. And there is historical precedent that we have to go back and remember. What we had, it wasn't perfect. The fact that we became completely seduced with money and the Celtic Tiger, and to hell with, and I say this to the Arts Council, to hell with defining culture by how many tourists go to a show, or how many people do this, or how many people spend money on. And it's the same in Britain. We have it now as well. You know, we justify West End theatre because so many people go and they spend so much money. And that's the justification for the Arts Council in Britain actually giving money to the arts. Yes, that's all true. But when I went to London first, when I came out of drama school, there was an amazing guy called Roland Jacquarello. Now you think about this, 1978. Think of Ireland in 1978, think of the relationship between the Brits and the Irish in 1978. And Roland Jacquarello said to the British Arts Council, I want to give you some money. Give me some money. I want to do Irish plays across Britain. and he hired 15 people, technicians and actors. And he hired me to play Christy Mann in Playboy, and to play a small role in Brian McMahon's Honey Spike. And Brie Brennan was the lead in the Honey Spike. Amazing now, Brie Brennan, famous actress. And we went off. We went off in a Ford Transit van with 12 actors, or you sat with the bloke who did the lighting of the sound in the 3-ton truck. And one of those experiences one weekend was driving from Sittingbourne in the south of England to Edinburgh, because that's the way the tour had been booked. From Saturday to Sunday to Monday. But I can tell you, it was amazing. Yes, we played some lovely art centres. We played a fantastic place in Cardiff called the Sherman Arms. We also played the Irish Club in Coventry and the Irish Club in Birmingham. And if we had been playing this venue, we would have turned up. And God rest his soul, Morris, the old guy with the beard, who tried to avoid as much as he could of the actual graft, would be telling us all where to put everything. And the truss would go up for the lights, and this brilliant composite set would go up here, and the chairs would go out, and it was on a rake, so people could see what you were doing, and the people would turn up, like Birmingham Irish Club, Coventry Irish Club. And what an experience it was as an actor, and how rewarding it was. And it was a damn good production, because he and Terry Palmer, who directed Playboy, were good directors. And we felt rewarded, not because we were saying, oh, we've been rewarded. We've read an Arts Council piece of paper here that said that we should be doing this because it's socially relevant, and we feel good. No, he just did it. He just did it. Because he believed in the power of theatre. And we weren't playing to tens of thousands or millions like television does. We were touching people in the space. And I defy people to doubt that some of those people will still remember those performances and those experiences the way that you will remember some of the experiences you will have had in the live space. We have to fight for that art. We have to fight for that tradition of theatre. Whether it's in the amateur world, and the amateur world is being respected now by the professional world in the UK, or whether it's in the professional world, or whether it's professionals who have to do something else because funding isn't there today. So I am a professional, and I will work to professional standards, but I'm going to work in a collective. I'm going to share the profits, whatever I have to do. I'm going to rent this space. And I'm going to make people communicate in terms of marketing me. I'm going to demand some marketing support. I'm going to do my PR. I'm going to get an audience. But I also urge you practitioners to listen to what the guy was saying about going into those schools. There is a tendency to have a snobbery about so-called theatre in education. If the 25-year-olds of tomorrow have never seen a live experience, how the hell are they supposed to turn up and go into the flashing new building that may be built in 2030? Why should they? They've never tasted it. After working with Jack Relevance, I went to a company called Contact in Manchester in 1979, still at the point where everybody believed theatre could change the world. Before Thatcher and Scarlett tore the country apart. And Contact was an incredible place. Yes, it's at the University of Manchester. Yes, we did plays in the evening on the main stage. But we did things called playdates in the mornings, where Henry V was taken, deconstructed. Scenes were played and performed by 4 actors with simple props and costumes. We played to 400 school kids who were studying the text. And it was linked with dialogue, etc., in terms of looking at the different issues of the play. There was a community theatre that went down and actually worked in the community. And there was so-called theatre in education. No, not boring. An incredible piece of writing called Craig and Bentley. Now, in terms of what you were talking about last night, Monica, Craig and Bentley is about the last young person who was hanged in Britain. And a piece of theatre and education, a piece of work, was written, which we brought to schools, which meant getting up at 7 o'clock and being in that school at 9 o'clock and putting up a simple set, bringing the kids in, sitting them down, performing the play for an hour, and then taking the Q&A. And who was in that piece? The guy who's considered now to be one of the great British actors, Roger Allen, established British actor from the London stage, played the Lord Chief Justice of England. I was Craig, a guy called Pete White, who was there. And it was again a fantastically rewarding experience that I will never forget. Why were we all in contact? We were all in contact because of a guy called Richard Williams, who was running the company, who hired us, who brought us together. Again, another important issue in terms of the decision, the courage of leadership. The same way that I had to learn that I was actually more suited in terms of my skill base to producing than to acting. You in this community need to look to yourselves and say, what am I? What is the contribution I can make? Go back to the famous Kennedy quote. Not what culture and the arts and entertainment can do for you, but what you can do. What social, political, cultural, educational contribution you can make. Because in asking that question and answering it, there is a huge reward for you and the dignity that you receive from being clear about your role and your contribution. And we're only doing it for the blink of an eye. All those people, my parents' generation, who worked in that voluntary sector. Whatever your political views about the religious institutions who did educate this country for decades, they all did it for a moment in history. And this is your moment. And it's only a moment. And in 40 years' time, the majority of us will be dust in the wind. And it'll be somebody else's responsibility. So you're working in a context now, looking forward. But have the conversations about who we are, and why we are who we are. And also then ask the question which, particularly those of us I think who leave the country have to ask. Do I want to change anything? Do I actually want to change something about the DNA that can make me more whole, outward looking, more secure, more peaceful in who I am, and then collectively move forward together with your skills? I want to say some things about practical things about 2030 that I'd like you guys to ask of the powers that be when the time comes. It's fantastic that they're talking about transportation. When I was a kid, you got on the bus on North Circular Road when you were in town, or the bus took you to school and took you home for lunch in the Crescent. Wow. And back again to school. People have to feel secure in transport and coming to the centre of the city and being able to get home safely as well. They're talking about education, some educational hub in the middle. One of the tensions in the city at the moment, I think from what I hear, is that you guys have got an amazing place out there in the university. I know you said to me that you've come to yourself since August and started working into the city. There is this extreme tension in 2030, which is saying we're now going to take, for the sake of the people, the state is going to make a decision. It's going to impose a solution, that we're going to rejuvenate the centre. Mary Immaculate, the lime tree, how is it going to be dealt with and respected in the context of that? Does the Millennium Theatre have any relevance in the context of this rejuvenation of the city centre? And what is the relationship significantly of 12,000 students and whatever it is, 4,000 staff to the city centre. Very fortunately, I happened to be sitting on a train yesterday, coming back from a meeting at my old college with a guy who runs the South Bank Centre in London. And I said to him, what has made the difference at the South Bank? Because my experience living north of the river is the two bridges that have been built across the Thames. The new Hungerford bridges have made a difference. He said that's part of it. The other part is that we have a promenade between two extraordinary, iconic things, the London Eye and Tate Modern. And between the London Eye and Tate Modern, there is now a promenade. And along that promenade, the footfall is 24 million a year. And before those two iconic structures went up, it was 6 million. There's a critical mass. There has to be vitality. There has to be retail. There has to be beauty. There have to be trees. There have to be cool places to sit. There has to be some place to flirt. There has to be some place for a family to go. There has to be some place for people to have a Christmas fair and to feel safe in. But it isn't just a matter of coming to a place and all looking at each other and going, what the hell are we going to do now? It has something to do with promenading, and it has something to do with movement. And if you think about some of the greatest spaces like Barcelona, it has to do with promenading. It has to do with walking up and down the Rambles. And then, of course, the question of the architecture. And is it going to be landmark architecture? Is it going to serve a purpose? If it's going to serve a purpose, for God's sake, make sure everybody can at least see the stage. Also, on a very practical level, the college allowed us at yesterday had the stupidity and the misfortune in the 80s to build a theatre in the round, which is a catastrophe. It's now going to cost that college £1 million to sort that theatre out and to make it a multi-purpose space. And if you think of Mecca, and all those people circling Mecca, imagine the wonderful, mysterious, beautiful black box of mystery and storytelling and music, dance. And then around it, imagine the receiving space, whatever it is in terms of 21st century materials. You can actually define the beauty of an inclusive space for all those activities to happen that I described, plus access to the river, etc., and banning the car. So they don't have to be at odds. The external welcoming space and the simplistic beauty of the mysterious black box in which you tell your stories. And fight for that flexible space. And if it is going to be built in 2030, it does need to hold at least 500 people. And somebody needs to ask themselves how many of the 500,000 that I saw in the video to do with Limerick live within 1 hour of here are going to actually be encouraged to come here. And Limerick needs to say to the rest of them, okay, we're the capital of the Midwest. We're the capital of 500,000 of you. We have to serve our people in the city and in the immediate environments, like we did before, when the whole of Limerick County on a Saturday morning was in William Street doing its shopping. But you can serve a wider community. Now, you have to serve, you have to define who your audience is first and serve that audience. It isn't about, are we going to be famous in France or Brazil? Are we going to get awards in Germany or from the EU? It's about Ireland. It's about Limerick. It's about the kid in the North Circular Road and the kid in Moyross not being afraid of each other. And forget about the grand scheme of what people think about us. They will know about us as a result of what we do. City of Culture, lastly. Legacy. The infamous word that what you're telling is, see Sebastian Coe coming out with time and time again about the Olympics in London. City of Culture test is going to be what is the legacy? What is going to be the funding in 2015? What is going to be the continuity? If you take your responsibility, artists, seriously, I think you have a right to know what your future is beyond a single year. It's depressing and frustrating when you go on the Arts Council site and see that of the 9 annually funded theatre companies, 7 of them are in Dublin. We're too small a country to fight with each other. We've been doing that, but it's unproductive. We know it. And we can't just say Dublin gets it all and we don't get anything. But we have a right to something. And I don't know enough about how it functions here and who the practitioners are to know that that is simply wrong. And I'm concerned about you, but I'm actually concerned about the fact that the people and kids in the schools don't have the material to interact with that I wish that they had. And that's why I would ask you to start having the conversations now and somehow challenging the Arts Council and the city authorities as to what's going to happen in 2015.